blanket for yourself over there, Joey? It's really cold in that alcove.
It is summer, was always wrapped up, bundled up too. Okay, it is 6 p.m. I call to order the February 13th, 2020 meeting of the Moab City Planning Commission. First item on the agenda is approval of minutes. Looks like we have minutes from June 13th and minutes from October 24th.
And that pretty much catches us up.
Oh, fabulous.
Pretty much.
I will entertain a motion if anyone has them or any corrections to be made to the minutes.
I've read through them, and I don't think there needs to be any corrections.
Do you want a motion?
Very thorough.
Yeah, I make a motion we approve.
Okay, second?
I second.
All right, all in
Both
favor?
sets?
Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
And that's both
Full
sets.
sets.
Both of them.
Great. Okay, third item on the agenda, citizens to be heard. So this is if there's anyone here to talk about something that is not already on the agenda. We have a public hearing continuing tonight, and we also have an action item approving the Four Corners Community Health, which I'd be happy to entertain public comment on when we get to that, if people are here for that too. So this is just something that's not on the agenda otherwise tonight. If you have anything, if you would come on up. All right. Great. All right. Number 4, continued public hearing and possible recommendation to City Council Ordinance 03-2020, an ordinance amending the City of Moab Municipal Code Section 1769050E to modify the minimum square footage for construction of workforce housing units from 1,000 square feet to a minimum of 400 square feet. So this is a public hearing. If you're interested in speaking at the public hearing, there are sheets out in the hallway. I believe they are what color?
There are 2 colors. I don't think it matters.
Okay, either one. If you wouldn't mind quickly just grabbing a sheet, you don't need to write anything on it other than just your name, and then give that to Joey over there.
Right, or if you want to just submit a written comment, you can use those sheets for that as well.
Okay. So if anyone is here for that public hearing, which we are continuing from our meeting last month, our last meeting as well.
So,
All right.
ready?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll give a little background since there may be, is there anybody interested in this item?
Of course.
So I won't go into the big spiel, but this is an amendment that came about because we had an applicant who's proposing a hotel, and what they would like to do, what their first choice is to satisfy their assured workforce housing, is to actually build units as a sort of in a wing of the hotel, and make the rooms a little bigger than normal hotel room size, but you know, about 400 square feet. And when they began talking to us about it, we reviewed the existing code, which says that the minimum square footage for assured workforce housing unit, I'm really bad at that, was 1,000 square feet, and it was supposed to be a 1-bedroom or a 3-bedroom unit. And when we started thinking about it, we felt like if we really want developers to build workforce housing on site that would benefit their employees, you know, people who are in the future will work there, and that are developed at the same time as the hotel is developed, that maybe some flexibility should be built in to allow that. Because when you look at per square footage costs, if they were to do 1,000 square foot units, the cost of those units wouldn't make any sense for them to build it, and they would, their alternative would make more sense to just pay the fee in lieu, which is great, and we certainly have housing projects where the fee in lieu could be used. But when you have a proposal where a hotelier is actually providing providing the units on site to be built at the same time, and then at a price point that would be applicable to their employees, then we're getting low or very low income housing, which again, if you're doing 1,000 square foot unit is pretty hard to do and build it and make the numbers work. And their option would be probably just to pay the fee and then not do the units on site. And you know, the whole goal of this is to try to have hotels offset at least some of the impact of the housing for employees that will be generated on the site. And there are a number of different alternatives. You can pay the fee in lieu, which is strictly based on a formula, based on square footage, and then the type of overnight accommodation you're proposing. You can build them or donate, I think you can donate land. Yeah, you can donate land or build them somewhere else. You can build them on site, which I think there's been a lot of discussion about that being sort of a preferred alternative because they get built then there on site. Or they can buy an existing unit in town and deed restrict it so that it maintains, they're supposed to deed it to the city, and then that deed restriction would maintain the price point to various levels of income. In most cases, people are looking toward the sort of more affordable options, like building units that are more toward market rate, but they would still have to be, they'd still have to meet the requirements of the ordinance. If you build less affordable units, you have to build more of them. If you build more affordable units, that very low or low income or extremely low income, then you do fewer units. And so the question today is the unit size. The code was adopted, and I gave you way more information than you probably ever wanted. But both Corey and I, mostly Corey, went back and dug up the minutes from that meeting, and we also looked at, and I provided a link to you about that discussion. The Planning Commission had recommended a 500 square foot minimum, and that's what was being discussed until about the last 10 minutes of the whole discussion. And for a while it was tracking with the pad, so the thought was that the 2 unit allowances would be consistent, but the Assured Workforce Housing Ordinance was adopted before the pad was adopted. So at the meeting, Kaylin, the City Council member Kaylin Jones, made a motion for the minimum unit size to be 1,000 square feet, and it was approved. So, and people ask why 500, why 400, why 1,000? We did a bunch of economic modeling based upon a round number of 1,000 square feet. And again, some of the discussion was that if people are providing more affordable units on site, then maybe there should be some flexibility. There was that discussion, and there had been that discussion previous when the Council and Planning Commission were considering both the PAD and the Assured Workforce Housing together. So, after we hear from the public, we'd be happy to hear from you about, hopefully you read some of the information, kind of about what your take is on it. So there are a couple of alternatives for you. The proposal as recommended would modify the minimum workforce housing size to 400 square feet and would allow a studio configuration. And then last night at 2 in the morning, I thought about another option, which would be for there to be an amendment to that same section, but we would leave the language as it is with 1,000 square feet, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, and then add a paragraph right below that that says, for housing that is provided by a developer on site that's built concurrent with the project itself and targeting employees that will work at that facility and those income levels, that the city council could consider reductions. And in reality, it's kind of it makes sense for it to be a city council action because and then we get into these contracts with these people and everything, and it's kind of a high level, it's a high level arrangement that we have to deal with these affordable housing things. Every single one is an agreement for a different thing. So the council basically looks at them anyway. So we felt that might be an option that you want to consider as well. So what we're asking is that you make a recommendation to the city council. Yes, no, modified, any of those options are open to you. So I'd be happy to answer any questions as far as I know. I pretty much gave you all the information in the packet that we could come up with. And we talked to some people too, but that's what we found out.
So Nora, I have a question. So if it were this change would only apply when it is provided on site?
Yes.
Whereas the minimum square footage, if you're providing housing otherwise, is what? Would still be 1,000?
Yes.
Okay.
If you want that.
Yeah.
I know that there was some discussion, I'm sorry,
Oh, you're right.
hold on a minute. I know there was discussion about, well, isn't this number kind of arbitrary? And there's some scientific basis for 1,000 square feet. The 500 square feet, again, there was nothing really scientific about that other than the option of allowing unit size flexibility a little bit more. And I think for some of the workers that work in a hotel, which is the case here, but it could apply to other kinds of overnight accommodations, in order to provide them an opportunity to provide housing for those folks who work at the hotel or are similar in their income earning capacity. The hotel actually would have to subsidize the construction of those units and subsidize the rent. And we would enter into a terms of agreement with the developer for all of those things. It would be their obligation in perpetuity or 50 years is what I think that the deed restriction is required. So
Did you say subsidized rent?
yeah, they have to meet certain income levels, and certainly building the units probably in reality will cost more than what they can rent them for if they're aiming to be able to allow employees that work at their facility or other kinds of similar kinds of facilities. So the kind of very low income range. Most of the projects that we've talked about with people, they're closer to the moderate income range. Other people have chosen to pay the fee in lieu. And again, that's a negotiated process with the city council. There's a formula, but if they want to protest that, there's an option for that to occur. So there's a little bit of flexibility already built in. This would just allow additional flexibility.
So how are we, forgive me if this is in there, it's been a while since I've really delved into the ordinance, certainly the version that city council passed. How are we, so say we have very small units that are on site, smaller than 1,000 square feet. What is the guarantee that those will fall in the very low income range rather than in the moderate or average income range?
That they have chosen to target is 11, and that's based upon the affordability levels.
So they'd have to have more if they were going for, yeah, okay.
Or paid a fee in lieu.
Great. And there's no combination that can happen? Where they could have,
I suppose
they could build 11 500 square foot units, say we're going for very low income, end up going for moderate, and then just paying the rest out in fee in lieu?
Perhaps.
Okay,
I mean,
that gives me a little pause.
Every situation is really an individual agreement that we enter into with the developer through it's called a LURA, Land Use Restriction
Agreement, yeah.
And it is a deed restriction that's enforceable, that goes with the property when the property is sold, and it has a duration of 50 years.
Yep. I guess my main concern would be that this might be, there might be some sort of, definitely, not necessarily with the instant case that's in front of us right now, where someone's wanting to do it at the time, but in the long run, there could be a way where you could use a combination of, where the intent could not match what ends up, or the stated intent couldn't match what ends up happening at the end of the day. And I would, I guess, want some sort of assurance that that would end up in the LURA, that it was actually, if it was smaller square footage, you were tied in some way that wasn't just the numbers to it being very low income qualifying when it comes to the rent.
Well, they would have to enter into a contract that says they can only charge so much for rent, and it's based annually on whatever the
But
AMI is.
we could feasibly get a developer who enters into that agreement, something doesn't work out, they end up building a smaller number of units, charging more, or sorry, excuse me.
We pull their certificate of occupancy.
Okay. I'm
Well,
just
their
trying to think
business
like all the
license-
scenarios that could
their
play
business
out.
license is probably more likely. If
Yeah.
it's up and running, we
Mhm.
pull their business license.
Yeah.
If it hasn't gotten a C of O, we would pull that until, we would not issue that until the issue is resolved.
Okay.
And it's a legal contract.
Correct.
I got a question about that. Are we basing this on a joint income?
Yeah, it's based on household income.
It's per
Household?
household, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a formula that we use for all our workforce in affordable housing. County uses the same concept and the same, it's, based on what the AMI is and their formulas that tell us what the maximum rents can be, based upon size of household and income of household.
Okay. So if you have a motel like this young lady over here does, and they're going to build on-site for this accommodation, and one of the employees works for them, and then the other one doesn't,
Shouldn't matter.
shouldn't matter?
No.
Okay.
They have to be employed in
But when you
Moab
say-
County,
Okay,
and then they are, the rent is controlled.
okay, so they will be paying rent.
Oh, yeah,
Okay,
but they might be paying $475 instead of $1,000,
yeah, sure.
or $375 instead of $850. So, yeah, I mean.
Yeah.
Rents would be subsidized slightly.
Yeah, it's fair to the motel. I mean, you got to be, yeah,
It's the first hotel that's really stepped up and said, we want to build them outside.
right.
Well, and I do think what you said about the concurrent building is very important, and I think we should highlight that for city council, that if they are going to do these reduced size units, that it does need to be built concurrently, that they can't kick the can down the road and build it later.
I agree. I think that's an important component to have in whatever we put in, if we recommend something to city council. Should we open the public hearing now, and then we can discuss after? Okay, I will open the public hearing. If anyone's here to speak, grab one of those sheets and come on up. Or come on up and fill a sheet out later.
No, huh?
All right, I now close the public hearing. So my inclination is for us to recommend reducing 1,000 square feet in some way, and then putting in the condition that you suggested, Nora, about it being open to city council amendment variance down the road if someone's particularly interested. I think 1,000, it's funny, but this, because we recommended something very different to city council when we were writing this in the first place, it surprised me when this came up that it's 1,000 square feet. I don't think I tracked that's what it ended up. When it passed, that seems huge to me. My whole house is 1,000 square feet.
Oh, I know, I lived in 500 square foot.
But I'm not saying that we should give an easy out to meet the requirements that are there for a very good reason, but I do think some sort of reduction to make it so the baseline is not quite so high, so a developer looking at this doesn't see the number and then just completely write that option off, where it does come within the weighing whether or not it's feasible for them or something they want to undertake, makes, I think, that interest a little easier, but at the same time, we don't want it to be such a huge steal for a developer where choosing one of the other options, they would end up maybe in the long run doing more to provide affordable housing for the community based on the fee in lieu or providing an alternative site.
So this is the language that
It says, and A that targets. I'd noticed that in your email.
oh yeah. Ooh, this-
Make sure
See, it's gone. So this language has what's currently written in the code, which is 1,000 square feet, which you can modify absolutely, any way you want. And then adds a sentence that says, as an incentive to get workforce housing built on site concurrent with the development of the project, and that targets the affordability needs of the future employees of the project, the city council may consider a smaller unit size and or different configuration.
I'd like to ask a question. Nora, have you looked at any of the standards in other tourism communities? Have you looked at the standards in Telluride, Aspen, or Park City, Utah?
We have, just in general, and I think with affordable housing, it's sort of, it takes a multi-pronged approach to this, and nobody has, I can tell you, nobody has the answer. And lots of communities do it lots of different ways. And we ourselves have a multi-pronged approach. We have law and language we're actually developing as a city. We have the assured workforce housing. We have other tools through Housing Authority of Southern Utah. In fact, we had a meeting today and talked about all of our different arrows in the quiver for addressing affordable housing. So I'd say that there's not really a formula, and some communities may have smaller or larger minimum unit sizes. We can certainly do more research on that. Although our point of view is we're just trying to get stuff built as soon as we can. And what's the best way to do that? From a staff perspective, that's our main train of thought. And whether the city council would be in favor of this, I have no idea. Neither one. They have said that they would be willing to consider it, which is what we're moving forward.
Yeah, I would like to point out that Park City started doing this as early as 2005, 15 years ago, passing an ordinance.
Earlier than that.
Earlier than that, and it's actually, if we use their same formula, which actually is a science, and it's stood up for 15 years, we actually would be creating 3 times as much housing, according to them, and the legislature really loves Park City. They generate a lot of money.
Actually, the state does the same thing to Park City they do to us. In
Okay.
terms of we sort of have a target on our back. But Park City's housing requirement has changed a lot over the last 25 years. I can tell you that from experience. And they're a very different community in that they have a sales tax, just like we do, but they also have property taxes that are pretty high. And all those second homes in Deer Valley and all over Park City pay a higher rate, significantly, basically 40% higher tax rate than people who are primary residences. So they have more money to deal with and more money to put towards subsidizing housing. Their program's also been in place for, we were working on it in the 90s. And I worked on it when I was with Summit County as well. And like I said, I don't think there's a silver bullet, but if you're more comfortable with what kind of things they're proposing, that's going to.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying their hotels are the same size as ours. They charge the same per unit per night for us, approximately. they're a little bit higher, but we still are very comparable to many Park City hotel prices. So I'm saying developers here are not going to lose out on making money from their hotels if they provide enough affordable housing for our community. And I'd also like to point out that we're doing developers and businesses a favor, because if we don't have enough people to run a tourism economy, that means bad business. That means a really bad experience. So I think we do need to look at some standards that have been in place for 15 years or more that have worked and emulate them a little bit more before we reinvent the wheel.
The other thing that Park City has is they have major employers. So both now it's only 2 ski resorts in the basin. And they have had to belly up to the bar and actually build affordable housing. There are also other businesses that are choosing to build affordable housing. It's gotten so critical that the businesses, and here too, I mean, the condo next to mine is rented out by somebody who has workers in there all the time, and they rotate depending on stage of construction. That's what has to happen in order for people to be able to work here. So our city council chose the method that they chose on the assured workforce housing. Are there other ways to do it? Absolutely.
I don't think making it a smaller requirement, though, is a benefit to our community or to our business owners, because we're already having staffing problems and housing problems in the city.
Well, I don't know if I agree with that, and I'll tell you why. Is because a single wide trailer, which is what several families are living in right now, they're working for some of these overnight accommodations. How many square feet do you think one of them are?
About 600 to 1,000.
No, they're 9, 10 feet wide and about 40 feet long, and that's 400 square feet. Okay? So I think we're doing a great service by just doing something. At 400 square feet, if we could get the owners of a motel, a brand new motel going in, to build something that's 400 square feet and maybe provide laundry services or something outside of that unit, so they could take care of that, it would help that 400 square feet. I say we jump on it. Let's get something to the city council. Let's don't keep doing this. We've been doing this for a while. Let's give them something to work with. I agree that 400 square feet is probably not enough if you're going to be having it separated from the motel. That should be at least 500 square feet. And the reason we come up with that was because we wanted them to have laundry. We wanted to have a heat system in there. We wanted to have that kind of stuff. That's why we suggested 500 square feet. I think we should give it to them. 400 square feet, I think it's plenty.
Anybody
I
else?
do think there's like a lot of utility in like a 400 square foot like room on site. Like at Sea Haven, we have clients who like come up from the reservation and like work at like these hotels and try to send money back to their families like onto the reservation. Like at $375 like a room, like you're not gonna find a room in the city like at that price. And this is also on site. A lot of our clients don't have transportation. And so like, and it's an individual private space. You're not gonna find an individual private space for $375 in this town. But like, also if we do bring it down to 400 square feet, like we were told that all of the units are gonna be built at 400 square feet. And so like, are they not? The 11? Yeah, and so I mean, if we bring it down to the 400 square foot level, I think Marianne had said that that would potentially like save the developers $500,000. And so at that point, there's no incentive for them to do anything but the bare minimum, like from my perspective, like, cause it'll save them like the greatest amount of money. And unfortunately, those like 400 square foot units that might accommodate like a single woman who's trying to like work in those situations, that's also not really reflective of the entire workforce that they're gonna be employing.
It's a variety.
Yeah.
That's why we're looking at a variety of unit types.
Yeah, this would be more reasonable if they kept the 11,000 required square feet and built a.
1,000.
Well, they're proposing to build 11 units at 1,000 square feet each is what's in the.
I just meant generally,
Okay,
not in the
so-
present case.
So as it stands right now, the requirement is 11,000 square feet. You get me?
Yeah, I do,
So
like you said.
So if we reduce it by 60% of the square footage, they're getting a pretty big cut. And they could actually just build like more units at 400 square feet and still give us the 11,000 square feet total, is what I'm saying.
I
So
know, but-
let's ask for.
But isn't there
We
the
would
formula?
still need to recommend a modification to the ordinance as it's currently written. So I know a third option that we have would be requiring a unit to still be 1,000 square feet, but allowing smaller unit configurations. So that would be a way.
To have,
that
like,
that would
yeah, to
be
set the
able to
bar for
work.
square footage, but you can have a variety of different unit sizes as long as you maintain that level of square footage that we're asking for.
For what they're required
Yeah.
based on the affordability levels,
Right.
yeah. Which as it's written now is not an option. Now it's just 1,000 square feet
1,000
per
square feet.
unit.
Average is the way the code is written, which is what I believe is being suggested.
Is that how that's been interpreted,
That's
though?
what it says right here, an average of not less than 1,000 square feet per unit, but it says, then it goes on to say, developers shall provide a mix of one bedroom and larger units.
Okay.
So it doesn't mention studios.
So they already can build under 1,000 square feet, right? As long as they're building some bigger houses.
That would be an option for them.
Yes, no, yeah. Studios, no. It does say, I mean, if you're taking it textually, which I assume that's how it's being interpreted, is 1 and 2 bedrooms, and I think that is a major oversight too.
500 square feet would give them 2 bedrooms.
Could.
But it's more comfortable
Well,
as a
but,
small
but,
one-bedroom studio.
but I know, but aren't we kind of like stepping over the bounds when we say that we're going to be concerned about how much money they make or all of that? That's not really our job. It has nothing to do with us.
Well, making sure the 3 options are equitable.
We're just trying to make it so it's right. Something that we can recommend that's fair for everyone.
I think it comes down to, I think the ultimate question is, do we want to do something to incentivize this particular option of the 3 workforce housing ordinance options in some way over the other 2? One is off-site providing, and the other is the fee in lieu,
The
which
lieu, yeah.
everyone has chosen up until this point, almost.
Yeah, there was one developer that bought a couple houses, but when we got into the nuts and bolts of the deed restriction, they backed out and just paid the fee.
Yeah.
I mean, that's reality.
It's
It
exactly.
is, it really is.
And it's just, they're still gonna have to pay the fee in lieu at the end of the day, but do we want to do something that will actually incentivize this particular option, which I think the understanding is that this is certainly the quickest way to increase units available affordably in the city. So I think that's question number 1 we should answer, and if the answer is no, then we don't need to recommend something to city council, because that's the real reason to do this.
Yeah, it's to incentivize on-site, built at the same time, and targeted toward that
Yeah.
low,
Right.
very low.
So it's incentivizing building hotels that build their own housing. So we're also incentivizing building more hotels at the same time.
Well, as code is currently written, no.
I haven't gotten it in my brain, but I suppose you could find it, although if nobody can apply.
Yeah. That's the conversation for later in the meeting. It seems that 1,000 is completely disincentivizing this particular option. So my inclination would be to have a smaller number that is the requirement, not less than, and then to add in the red line text that Nora suggested as well.
I think that we need to stand up for the people in our community and offer a really reasonable way for them to get housing, and I don't think this is it, and I would be willing to entertain a different proposal, but I don't think any of these are actually sophisticated to work for us. So I don't think at this time, this proposal is the right thing to erase all the work that we've just done.
I don't think it erases all the work we've just done. We just have to understand that there's a different mix of affordable housing that we need, and some of that is providing housing for people like Luke described who need somewhere potentially on-site to live when it's not, work being the primary focus, why they're in the community in the first place. And this is not the whole idea with all of everything we're doing with affordable housing is that there's not one broad stroke that we can take that's gonna fix everything. It's a whole bunch of little holes that we're trying to fill, or a whole bunch of little options, and this does seem to provide a new option where, if appropriate, this is something that can be done. So I do see it as providing something that is needed now for a very specific subset of the community who would like a place that's quiet and private to live and to put their stuff and to have, you know, friends over for dinner.
And the other
Okay.
thing, the other thing that could go into a LURA or business agreement where we talk about all these things with each developer, and we happen to have an applicant who's willing to do bike storage and some of those other things to make those units more livable.
Right.
And with any negotiation,
Yeah.
we would probably want to make sure that that's the case.
Yeah, and it would be, I mean, every single one of these is a negotiation, right? Ultimately, that has to go through city council.
Right.
So that is why I'm comfortable with making some sort of change, because this is not the final oversight on any project. It's not just saying X square feet, you're good to go. You know, here's a toilet and a flimsy wall and a twin bed that folds up and is also your table. You know, like, that's not what we're saying, and that's not something that would be approved by the planning department.
Right.
So
It wouldn't be. But how about the pad?
400 seems small, though, to me.
Well,
I'm not
but-
inclined to go with 400.
But with the pad we were,
275.
275.
that's, and I was saying that was ridiculous. So you were willing to go 275 for the pad, and then you're not willing to go 400 for this. Doesn't make sense. There is some conflict.
How is the amount of units calculated? Like, how many units do you have to have?
Based on affordability,
Okay.
and there's a formula. And we've, as I mentioned, it's in the code, in the assured workforce housing
Okay.
section, and I can bring that in actually. But, you calculate it based on the affordability level. Let me see if I can remember.
While Nora's bringing that up, a point, because it seems that particular point of contention is on the number, the square footage.
You
And
could still,
If you haven't gone back to review the materials that Nora submitted and kind of that research that came along with it, that city council meeting, this number was decided in the last 2 minutes
Yep.
of this
Literally.
conversation among, so to give context to it, the calculation of Laura that was written originally into the code by our city attorney was designed at 500 square feet for the computation to work as far as number of units and what was, so the equitable size isn't really the conversation. It was, how do we calculate this so my numbers add up easier?
Yeah.
The county had computated at 1,000. So a member of the county came and said, this is what we're doing, and it's really easy because it's 1,000. It's much easier to multiply. At that point, the council literally said, well, I like to do what's easy, and then they passed it.
Yep.
So as far as the equity of 1,000, that wasn't part of that conversation. It was about the calculations.
Yeah.
So here's the chart, that is required. So hotels and motels have a higher requirement because they are higher employment generators, because they have housekeepers and, you know, more of everything. So if you see here, is the numbers are, the calculation is based on a 60,000 square foot platform. So if you're building a 60,000 square foot hotel and you want to do extremely, and you're targeting extremely low income housing, then you have to do 6 units. And it doesn't, and then there's also, the fee would be 57 per square feet. If you're going with moderate, you'd have to do 229, which is a huge jump. And then condominiums, there's less of a requirement, and then townhomes, there's a little bit more of a requirement. But these numbers are all based on research that was done, and recommended and approved. And I was, again, neither Corey nor I was here
So as it stands, it works out, so ideally the same cost to build those units would be the same cost to provide the fee in lieu per square footage? At what point do those not track anymore?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Marion, you did that a little last time.
Going up.
So for these guys, it's fee and lieu, it's like 1.7 million. So if they could build for 170 a square foot, it would be about even.
Okay.
Brian said he could do it for 140 a square foot, so,
Well, I think everybody could.
yeah.
So what is the square footage that we could go down to where that would still be an equal number?
Yeah, so I've played with that, and I think the answer here is to crank up the fee in lieu to give them more of an incentive to build their own places.
You know, the smaller you go in square footage, the higher you go in price per square foot.
Yeah, so I mean, I like the idea of giving the developer an option of saying, okay, you can build 275 square foot units, right? You can build 1,400 square foot units, but we've got to find that average right there. So maybe the answer is just opening up the square footage so that they have a broader range of what they can actually build.
So it'd be based on
Total square
required
footage.
square footage.
Yeah, yeah.
And if it's assuming 1,000 square foot unit, then 5.67 units or 6 units would be 6,000 square feet of affordable housing in whatever configuration.
But we don't have to use that 1,000. We could use 500.
Yeah.
And in turn, you would have 12, right, units with a
Yeah, I mean, you
1,000
could build
square
one
feet?
at 400 and one at
Yeah.
600.
500.
That way you get one for 2-bedroom and one with 1-bedroom.
Yeah.
And that really makes sense. I think that's,
So the
would
formula
be a good
for
thing.
this project works with total square footage, saying we would like 11,000 square feet is way less than any other city in the same situation as us is requesting.
But that's our fault.
That's our fault. So it's like, okay, we're already being really soft with this. Why would we go any lower? So if you keep that 11,000 square feet and just give them a broader range of, like occupancy size to work with, I think that's reasonable. But let's not go under the required square footage as it stands right now, because that number, although it doesn't pencil in for them to build everything at 1,000 square feet, like that number still is pretty equal to the fee in lieu. So it's like, it's kind of there for a reason. Maybe just give them a broader.
it was an arbitrary number. It wasn't given for a reason. He just said that.
Our city attorney
Right.
actually recommended it at the
Mhm.
time, because he felt that, in order to, he felt that it was more equitable for a developer, and we were kind of trying to balance the needs, and of both sides. So that's what was recommended, that's what the planning commissioner did last year. But, and it, it may be that in the coming years, we will want to relook at our formulas and be more strict and maybe charge more money. Although, we have yet to be sued over this, which is a really good thing. If we start accepting new applications for new overnight accommodations, I don't know, because those would all be subject to this.
Correct.
Yeah.
Can we, you know me, I hate arbitrary things put into stuff. Yeah, no, I'm not, I'm saying, the intent being we don't do something that's arbitrary. I'm just thinking for now,
Well,
so it sounds like kind of the consensus, at least from the folks that are speaking up, is that maybe we think it's pretty equitable how it is, how it pencils out.
and if you want to build more units that are smaller, that's totally fine. Build more units that are just smaller and charge less for rent if you think that's your market.
Yeah, no, and they'll pay the fee and lieu probably.
Yeah.
We don't want that. That's what we're trying to avoid.
I personally do not want that, no.
That's why I'm saying that let's get it so they will do it.
Yeah, well, if they
And
can-
and we're not gonna get anywhere. We're gonna be back here again.
I'm saying if they can build for $170 a square foot.
But
then
that's
less
not the
than fee and lieu.
point. But the point is how
Okay,
much
so-
money they spend.
Yeah, so
It's,
the amount that the apartment needs to cost in order for them to make money is actually in the housing study. So the city council could go back to that housing study and decide a more reasonable number according to that research. But I'm not just gonna sit here without having that data and just decide a number to recommend to them. But I can recommend that they go back to that research and they use those numbers to pick a number.
Changes year to year.
No,
We
we
can't-
did a study.
What's that?
The AMI does, but not the numbers that Mary Ann's referencing.
But I would like to recommend something you kind of brought up, and that is that if we go with 500 square feet on the average, then one can be 400 and one can be 600, and that's actually really good. It's much better than what we've got going now in town. Much better. So if you want to set the goal way up here and not achieve it, I say we get it to where it can be achievable, and let's move forward. That's actually pretty nice. 500 square feet is actually asking a lot. We're already asking them to provide the housing. Let's make it so it's possible to do it.
Yeah, I'd like to tell them to just reconsider the housing study.
Well, they probably, I mean, at some point, we will obviously relook at it after it's been in the works for a while.
So if we went with 500 square feet on average, could there be open shared use spaces that could also be
Yeah,
used
like
to-
laundry?
Well, laundry or a lounge area where you can hang out, watch TV. Could that count towards the total square footage?
No, as it's written, no, I don't think that would.
The way it's set up right now doesn't
Yeah.
require that. The pad does. The pad requires common space, recreation area, all that for 275.
And that's not going well.
Yeah, nobody's applying.
Nobody's applied.
So, but I think that has more to do with our existing zoning,
You might.
the R3.
I like the idea of smaller. I don't want it to be arbitrary. I don't know that just basing the number on something that one developer has requested is a way to amend our. And I keep thinking that we're having all of this discussion right now, and ultimately, at the end of the day, it's city council who makes that decision and recommendation, and more often than not, they spend a lot of time coming to very different conclusions that we have. So I don't know that I'm comfortable recommending a number at all. I don't know how others are feeling, but this is clearly a discussion that city council needs to have. I want to get it in front of them for discussion, but
way
maybe
it's
with
written
them
here, there
asking
is-
us to look into something after they've had a chance to think about it, because I don't want us to, quite frankly, waste a whole bunch of time coming to a number that's gonna be our process is gonna be ignored.
I agree, we spent an hour on this.
And they don't ignore,
Not ignore, but
but they definitely,
they weren't a part of this process. The idea that they will read our minutes, watch our video is hard when everyone's really busy.
and they
So.
make decisions based on other things besides just the
Mhm.
land use code.
Yeah.
They have lots of other considerations to take into account in their decisions, so their decisions are sometimes different than yours.
I will say one change I am comfortable recommending is that we put studio in there in the language. It currently doesn't technically allow for a studio, and I think it should. And that could come under the current square footage. You could have a 300 square foot studio and a 700 square foot 2-bedroom, and that would count as 1,000 square foot portion.
Many of your duplexes are 500 square feet apiece,
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
Just to give you an idea.
I've
Yeah.
lived in 4 units in my life that were under 500.
I don't think anyone here disagrees that 500 square foot or 400 square foot is livable. It's just the advisability of basically giving a pretty big get out of our workforce housing ordinance.
So,
It
but,
seems
so
like
what's our responsibility to the city council? Do they want us to just be this way? To just give it back to them?
I think
Well,
for
in
things
the-
like this, we can give a recommendation if we can come to something, otherwise,
You could forward a negative recommendation.
yeah,
Just
we could
say-
forward a negative recommendation and they could still look at it.
You could say we want to look at this more comprehensively
Mhm.
and maybe make
In the wording here, it says smaller unit size. It doesn't have, we can take out the 400 square feet and let the city council
Right,
decide
the
what
way it's drafted, it does that. It says the average is 1,000. You could do a mix of studio to allow some flexibility, but then this lets them kind of negotiate if it's being built on site at the same time and targeted toward employees they actually generate.
I like that. If someone wants to make a recommendation where we add studio and add everything that's in the red, leave it 1,000 square feet, that would put it in front of city council for discussion. They would hopefully be appraised of the fact that we were considering going down on the square footage and that maybe there is a recalculation that needs to happen. But then this would at least, in the present case, allow some potential for actually making the particular development that spurred this potential ordinance amendment feasible.
It's up to you at this point.
So we've been talking about it for about 40 minutes. If someone wants to make a recommendation, we can entertain that and then discuss it and potentially vote on it. Otherwise, we can table this again. Or-
I would prefer that a recommendation get made. I don't know
Yeah.
what we're gonna be able to achieve in 2 weeks. I mean,
Agree.
I understand Mary Ann's concerns for sure, but I think that would be a bigger look, probably.
I agree
But
too.
we could go that way too. I mean, whatever you want to recommend it's in your hands.
But if city council decides that the proposal that's in front of the planning department right now that spurred this potential ordinance change on is something that they would like to have happen, this allows them to do that without amending our whole code so definitively that that becomes such a, benefit of the bargain for every developer coming in the door from here on out.
Well, you know my recommendation.
Do you
I
want to make a
don't.
motion?
I would like to. And you can not do it. I would like to recommend that we as a council, or as the planning commission, that we recommend that 500 square feet, because they're giving us that option for 400. I think that might be low, but 500 square feet on the average instead of 1,000. And they can make that option. They can go to, and if they're going to put in like 10 units, they can go 400 and 600 all the way through, and that will give them 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom. That accommodates a family
So
with children.
So your motion is that we change what's currently in 1769-050 to no less than 500 square feet. Any other changes in your motion, Brian? Anything else on the screen?
And add mix of studio, 1 bedroom, 1 person.
Or are you just recommending a change to 500 square feet?
Well, they give us option number 1.
There's the third option that
The third
Is-
option,
is on the screen.
and I've got it
not-
here,
It's different than what's on there, though.
is it?
Yeah, it is.
Okay. Can somebody read that? Because I'm on an angle, I can't see it.
Oh, yeah, an incentive to get workforce housing built on site concurrent with the development of the project and that targets the affordability needs of the future employees of the project. The city council may consider a smaller unit size and/or different configuration. So it essentially gives some discretion based project to project to the city council as well.
It's up on the page.
Okay.
So is
Well,
that a part of your motion?
That is.
Okay,
Yes.
so motion on the floor, do you have a second, anyone?
So that second paragraph is part of your motion, or no?
I'm sorry.
In the red?
I'm unclear with what this motion is. Can we type it out?
The motion would be to amend 1769-050 to say not less than 500 square feet per unit. Developers shall provide a mix of studio, 1-bedroom, larger units based on the expected needs of the project as further specified in the development improvements agreement and/or the LURA. And then the second paragraph would be the motion that's on the floor right now. Would someone second that?
But I think Brian's.
I think we just need a second. There's a motion on the table.
You can just second it for purposes of discussion.
Or you
Or
cannot
cannot
second it, and we can take another motion. Okay, no seconds. Anyone else like to make a motion that we could entertain?
I'll make a motion that we submit it to city council with the changes with the studio and the second paragraph.
Okay, so leaving it as 1,000 square feet per unit.
Leaving it as 1,000
With those
square
change
feet,
it. Any
So as it reads on the screen.
as it reads on the screen.
a second for that?
I'll second that for discussion.
Okay, we have a second discussion. I support that.
Yeah, because I think like having that extra caveat of like the city council may consider a smaller unit size, like it opens up the door for that kind of like bargaining. If we have that average of 500 square feet, like potentially people will like try to build like a 275 square foot unit, but we're kind of starting off small. And so like starting off with like the larger size, it gives us a little bit more of an advantage, I think, in like the actual negotiations with flexibility for city council to accommodate some of the needs and like desires expressed by the developer.
Yeah, and it would allow it to be a floor plan in front of someone before something gets farther along in the process, where you could say, here's the mix we're looking at doing, here's our 275 square foot studio that's a component of this, but there's all of these other ones, look at this city council, and then it would be up to them, which I think is good, because it would still allow a developer to make those suggestions in a way that I think is tangible in front of the city council, where they could actually see what it is you're getting into, instead of just saying, yep, it's 400 square feet flat now from here on out.
I do have a question though. So if we like maintain the 1,000 square feet per, or like the average of not less than 1,000 square feet, like although smaller unit sizes are going to be allowed, are they still being held to that average of no less than 1,000 square feet per unit?
Unless they negotiate
Okay.
a smaller unit size on site.
For that, it's pretty narrowly
Okay.
defined.
So I have a second. All right, any more discussion? Okay, all in favor of Jesso's motion? Aye? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
Brian, how did you vote? Yes?
No.
He voted no. We have 5 in favor, 1 opposed.
Thank you all for
Yeah.
moving that forward. And who knows? Stay tuned.
Yes.
Yep.
So, yeah, we'll see if city council bites.
And I will get.
Thank you for coming.
Joey, I'll get this to you.
Okay. We have number 5, thank you to everyone else who is here for, of course, it's always the second or later agenda item. One day we'll write agendas, so the public interest item is first. This is an action item, the review and possible conditional approval of Planning Resolution 01-2020, approving the site plan for Four Corners Community Behavioral Health located at 76 East, 300 North. Nora or Corey?
I'm going to take over with the provided information. I'm going to work my way through that, and there's going to be quite a bit of that information. And then afterwards, we do have members of the application, I'll put it that way, that are available to speak.
Great.
So this is item 5, the Four Corners Community Behavioral Health Moab Clinic and Clubhouse, Moab Planning Resolution 01-2020. This item involves approving the level 2 site plan application for the development proposed at 76 East, 300 North, Nob Hill on the 1.92 acre parcel. This property is zoned C5 neighborhood commercial. The property is bordered by the C3 central commercial zone and the R3 multi-household residential zone. That proposed use has related permitted uses in this zone, including professional offices and clinics. This property is not currently in use, with a small single household structure and shed remaining on the property. This parcel is located directly east of Barlow's Jeep Rental and Wendy's, and south of Grand Tire Pros. The parcel being shown is subdivided on this map, but has been consolidated by the city council during their last meeting this past Tuesday, February the 11th. The amended parcel shows the consolidated lots and the access and utility easements for the proposed development. The development has a 16,400 square foot finished floor area that includes counseling offices and group rooms, with the upper level including activity and training spaces related to the treatment and services provided by the organization. The ground floor also having an exterior bike storage to be noted. This is just an example of the elevations on the site plan. I'll just move over to the first floor plan here, and we can go back and reference these. I'm just giving you a quick moment to view these in the second floor.
That's a pretty steep driveway, isn't it?
It is. It is, and we'll get to that. Access for the property will come off of 300 North. The applicants are proposing 35 space parking lot, including 4 ADA standard spaces. The standard computation for the proposed use, calculated from the off-street parking and loading number of spaces section of municipal code, would be 55 parking spaces. The applicant is intentionally proposing the 35 spaces and requesting a parking reduction requirement. As that parking reduction is allowed in the municipal code title 17, 09 220, subsection Q, special exceptions to the parking requirements. This reduction can be approved by the planning commission if the applicant can prove to the lower the minimum required is adequate for the needs of the development. The applicant has supplied a letter describing the justification for reducing the parking requirements as well as the parking study. The summary of that parking study is expressed in this graph representation. I was able to put this graph together so it's not being produced by the applicant. Once the applicant comes up, we can walk through it a little bit closer. Following an approval from the Planning Commission, the applicant would continue to coordinate with the city staff and city engineer to address all comments to the satisfaction of the city engineer before the issuance of a grading permit and/or building permit. The specific comments expressed as conditions of approval are included in the Planning Commission packet materials as Exhibit H and Exhibit J or I, but I think it's expressed as J. The applicant is also here to field any questions. At this point, if we want to, I don't know how we'd like to proceed, Kaya, if you want to respond to some of this information or have the applicants come up. I did. So yeah. In addition to this site plan approval, the applicant is proposing a parking reduction of 35 spaces of what would the standard computation be of 55. Included in the packet was the letter and reasoning behind that, and I think they're prepared to speak more to the reason that that would be something you'd like to entertain.
Great.
Is that replacing the building they have now? Over here on the corner? For mental health?
It'd
or
be
is that-
consolidating their two
Right.
separate buildings into one
So they're gonna stay
functional
there and then
space.
move there?
No, we're gonna sell the building here.
Okay. Because the parking you have there isn't,
We have no parking.
no parking anyway. So it's an improvement.
Does anyone feel strongly, should we hear from the applicants, or do you want to ask questions and then maybe they can answer them if they come up? Does anyone have any questions, anything that jumps out to them about this particular application? Or this particular site plan and then parking variance, whatever we're calling it?
I went and visited the site.
Exception.
Parking reduction exception.
Have you visited the site, anybody? That is a nice place for something like this.
I think the convenience and the walkability for clients of the building is huge, and just being able to have it in town, I think, is really beneficial.
Yeah, I agree.
And consolidated in one spot, so it's not two separate buildings. It's big too, because then those are, at least one is a building that can go to some other use too. Also centrally located.
May I make a motion, Madam Chair?
Do we want to hear, does any,
I have one comment.
yeah, would you mind coming up? Yeah. So if you want to come up and just say your name into the mic for the record, that'd be great.
I'm Karen Dolan, I'm the director of Four Corners. We have kind of a phase 2 plan, and that's affordable staff housing on this lot. We're hoping to in the future. So the parking exception would really help us in not using up that space for parking.
Good.
because we'll have townhouses with parking underneath. We're also looking forward to having our location in town. We looked everywhere for property, and we're so excited we have something in town because most of our clients don't drive. And so
Right.
we're excited to,
They mostly get dropped off, don't they? Get dropped off?
yeah, we have a van that picks up clients.
You have bike parking as part of the plan too, which is great, covered. Cool. Anyone have any questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, if people want to discuss, that's great. If someone wants to go ahead and make a motion, let's go for it.
Okay, I move to adopt Planning Resolution 1/2020, approving the Level 2 site plan for the Four Corners Community Behavioral Health Moab Clinic and Clubhouse, with the reduced parking requirement of 35 spaces as approved by the Planning Commission, and with the following condition: all outstanding engineering comments shall be addressed to the satisfaction of the city engineer as conditions of approval for Planning Resolution 01/2020, and satisfied prior to the assurance of a grading permit and/or building permit. Comments included as conditions of approval are expressed in attachments A and B.
Second of Marion's motion.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes unanimously, 6 out of 6. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for your patience. It's okay. We know you love meetings, Jalen.
All right.
Okay, any future agenda items?
Well, wait a
Nora.
minute.
Well,
Yeah, okay.
I mean, I'm just going through I know, we have more to talk about.
Future agenda items.
Coffee break.
We received a new application today for the new EMS building, which will be located up by the Huntridge Senior Facility, on 100 North.
What's
We received
EMS?
Pre-application of that.
Emergency medical services.
Ambulances.
Right.
It's gonna be where?
Uh,
By the
no,
Huntridge?
Up by the care
Yeah,
center.
where the old senior center used to be,
Yeah.
up there. They're gonna tear that existing building.
It's our
down.
current
Not Huntridge, but the
parking.
other one.
offices. But yeah, they're redeveloping that to a new project.
Right. And some of the offices that are there right now, like Trailmix is up there, whatever we're calling it these days. And actually.
Grand County non-motorized trails. Come
Yeah,
on.
yeah, yeah. And the county is actually renovating, well, they're removing a house and putting up a modular on First North, lower down, right behind their offices, to house those functions, the ones that are being displaced. And then we have one that you'll probably see pretty soon. It's Cane Creek condominiums, which are smaller units up on Cane Creek Boulevard. And they want to do for sale units. They're not deed restricted, but they would be more affordable just because of their size. It's a pretty energy efficient project, and you'll see that probably next month.
Is that a 2, 3-story?
It's,
Two,
yeah,
three?
multiple buildings, two stories, and as a part of the second building is a 3-story.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's
those
a lot
are-
of good
and,
smaller housing.
John, Matt, who's doing it? Matt
just-
Neeson
Yeah. Architectural Square.
and Courtney Kaiser is the architect, and then John Henry is involved. I know it's your favorite person.
My favorite. When will that be on the
Next
agenda?
month, probably. It's in the R4 zone, which is zoned for manufactured housing.
And will there be any deed restriction on it?
They're not using the pad, I tried.
I think it's R3.
R3?
It's R3, there's very few R4.
It's a little sliver
Yeah,
Yeah.
there.
it's like I'm in like the only R4, I feel like in town.
Hey, any housing's good.
Right.
Well, not if it all gets bought up by second.
True.
out of-
This-
Ding,
this
ding,
is-
ding.
These are, okay, I take that back.
Yeah,
So,
but
I mean,
more-
Sounds like
if it's
rentals.
affordable, it just means it's an affordable second home. I
yeah,
think
more
we should
inventory.
have
could
some
be.
restrictions
could be.
on
If we can, yeah,
if we can.
I know, I wish we could.
If there's a restriction that has to be for people, it's permanent, no night rentals.
Yeah, but it could be someone's second home,
It could be.
for sure, and there's nothing currently in code that we can do about that.
No.
Cool. Discussion item number 7. How brief can we keep this? I know it's important, but
Well-
I think we're all a little tired.
Yeah, it is important, and because we have 2.5 pretty new people, I wanted to start with something that we could really, where we could really accomplish something tonight, because there's a lot of background that goes into this, a year's worth plus. But the short answer is that we have been developing and reviewing new development standards for new hotels in the RC zone. Eventually, we would like to address also different kinds of overnight accommodations in the commercial zones in the city. But the first step was to look at hotels and motels in the recreation commercial zone, and to come up with some development standards so that hotels have to meet a certain sustainability requirements and design requirements and size and scale requirements that will result in a product that the community is happier with than what we've been seeing. And one of the things that the Planning Commission also talked about a lot was trying to leverage and provide incentives for additional commercial development in association with any new hotels to provide commercial space, smaller commercial spaces for more community-oriented businesses, or businesses that service the tourist population in the North Portland. So that's what we've been trying to achieve, and the Planning Commission got pretty close to making a recommendation. And the City Council had a work session, and they're a little bit all over the place. It's a good thing facial expressions don't show up on the minutes, but there's some discussion from the City Council about different things, some of their priorities. They're kind of rethinking some things. But they did direct us to come back to the Planning Commission and talk about the energy efficiency requirement. So I'm going to contact Brian's buddy and another solar guy to come in and talk about the feasibility of 80% electricity generated on site. And we'll do some additional research on that. They wanted us to look at the design standards and figure out, are the standards as drafted getting us what we want? The third thing was the commercial
Aesthetics.
incentive. And so tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about the design guidelines. And what we've done is Wyatt, our awesome high school student intern, went out and he's really awesome, took pictures of all of the hotels. And so we have produced those. We took the names off of them.
Oh, yes, this anonymous hotel we have.
Just to try to reduce we don't want to bash businesses, right?
No, of course not.
So all we're looking at is, and most of you know all of these, I'm sure. But what I want to hear from you, we're going to go through the slides one by one. And I'll point out a couple things to consider. And then at the end, what I want you to do, and it was really easy for me to do once I looked at all of these, summarize what you love and what you hate about, and not project specific, but in terms of materials, scale, sort of building articulation. In other words, is it one big long thing, or are there articulations where the parking is provided, color, building materials I think is an important one. So as we go through these, I want you just to kind of jot down some notes first. So this is kind of a visual preference, because everybody has different
They're
ideas.
1 through 31. Should we make notes on by the number?
You can, if you want. Sure, we can do that if you want. So, this is the first one, and it is, it has the advantage of being slightly lower in elevation than the existing road. Most of them are on Highway 191, the things we're going to look at. It also has some parking in front, but the majority of the parking is on the side or in the rear. It does have some building articulation. The color, has a kind of tries to match some of the colors that we see around Moab. It's pretty much stucco. I don't know if that's a number for what it is, but anyway. So it is what it is. So there's that one. This is number 2. And
Wait, are we,
Do you want to comment one
do you want to comment on each one rather than going through them twice? As we go? I'm
To have their
confused.
feedback
immediately?
each slide?
Yeah, probably?
Well,
Or
Probably talk
so
about
I'd
like,
kind of like you to look at all of them.
Oh, okay.
Because what happened
All right.
with me
I got
is,
it.
when I finished looking at them, it became immediately apparent.
So we're not saying, here's what we like about 1, here's what we like about 2, we're just saying, here's the general
Here's
things
the
we
general
like.
thing.
Okay,
What things do you like?
that's clear, great.
And what things don't you like? So
That sounds
I'm-
good.
Okay. This one has, the parking's kind of in the middle. It's there are several properties that the short side of the property is along the highway. So that's all that's the sort of primary entrance, and then it goes back from there lengthwise. And this is one of those. Again, it's mostly stucco. Color is pretty light, but it's what they felt was appropriate. This one is a sort of old-fashioned, motel, 2 stories. And did we write down the square footages and stuff?
Oh, no, we didn't.
Okay, so I have those.
It's in here somewhere.
Yeah, it's
The pad,
third page.
15,000?
But we should, because then it shows you the name.
Oh, right. Right.
Okay.
We got distracted in the office.
So this one happens to be 15,500 square feet and 35 rooms. And what we had been throwing around was 20,000 square feet per building and 60,000 square feet total per project. That would mean 3 of these plus. Or the building size is slightly smaller than the building size that's being proposed. There's not a lot of facade variation. Again, there is parking all along the front. There's also some other parking in the rear. Brick or pseudo brick.
Brickish.
Brickish. This is another one that has all its parking internal to the project, and has some street presence in that, there's that transition between the public realm or the sidewalk and the actual accommodations. There's, this porch that kind of softens that. It's not a big blank wall. There's some pedestrian scale there. There's some.
There is a big
variation
blank wall on the
facade.
other side, though.
I'm sorry?
There is a very large, big blank wall
Big blank
on
wall.
the other
Yeah.
side of this
There is.
building.
Yes, that is true.
Bike path blank wall.
And what we were proposing is that there be 4-sided architecture, so that we don't have the big blank walls.
Yes.
This one is, again, the presence on Main Street. This is off of the side street. There's not a lot of presence right on Main Street or 191. It's kind of set back, and has some different elements, different materials that are used. There's several different kinds of materials. There's a lot of facade variation.
What is the, and I can't, this term is in the back of my mind, but I can't remember it. What's the little pull-through area called?
Porte cochere.
Yeah.
Porte cochere.
How do you spell that?
Portechere.
Okay, thanks.
or coucher.
Porte cochere.
Porte
Porte
cochere.
cochere.
And sometimes there's some accents somewhere. But yeah, variation in the facade vertically. The parking is in front of it, so this is right from basically Main Street. This is what it looks like. This one, the parking is primarily in front. Most of the units are set in the back. One of the things that we were proposing was to have most of the parking to the side and rear, so that it's not, the street presence isn't necessarily parking. But this has some, some variation in it. It's not just one big long building. 2 stories.
But what's interesting about the last 5 motels you've showed us,
They're all 2 stories.
huh?
They're all 2 stories.
No, is they have no hallways. They're all entered from the outside.
That's right. They're all older. We'll get into some other ones. This one happens to be 46,000 square feet and 79 rooms. And it is 3 stories. And the parking is in the back. And they have some ins and outs this way and some ups and downs this way.
What number is this one?
8.
8. And again, the colors, there's a variety of materials. The colors are kind of earth tone-ish. This one, yeah, square footage of. Again, this is an older one. It's one of those with the lots that are long and skinny, so the presence on the highway, there's really not much of it, and what's there is what it is. 2 stories, interesting color. Here's another one where the parking is in the front, and they have a fence around it, decorative fencing. 2 stories. Again, the exterior hallways, which provides some interest to the facade, I suppose. It's not just big blank walls we're looking at. Some variation in facade, both up and down in this way. This one is 3 stories. This is a more current one with interior hallways. Lots of use of native colors that we see around here, a variety of colors, and some variety of materials. I don't know where this picture was taken from. Was it taken from Main Street from 191, or did you go on the side street?
I think it doesn't, yeah, pull in.
Okay. This one.
Needs paint.
Okay, this one is this sort of building. It has the park share, it has a little bit of in and out, internal hallways, real light colored, stucco, pretty much all stucco, or some kind of stucco relative. And then there just happens to be another one next to it. You can see the back.
Juxtaposition.
Interesting juxtaposition.
What's the size of this one?
I'm sorry?
What's
We
the
have a
size
size.
of this one?
I don't know, but it's not huge. I would say it's probably in the
50, maybe 50, 40?
maybe less. It's only 2 stories.
Yeah,
30?
yeah, I would say 30.
Really?
Probably
In that neighborhood,
1,000 square
yeah.
feet. Yeah, it's not huge. Maybe less. This one is actually more sort of condo style, but it calls itself a hotel. And it's off Main Street and looks more like a condo project. Again, we've got colors that are reflective of the environment and a lot of variation in facade and building layout. Parking is internal or behind or not really that visible. Well, none of it's visible from Main Street.
Should have this one. That's
This is
painted.
14.
No, that's not. No. Where is it?
I think it is. Maybe not.
Thinks it might be. Anyway, stories, long and skinny. The short end is on Highway 191. They have tried to do some articulation with their front facade. Most of their parking is in the side and rear. Colors are, it's a mix of materials, with certainly some stucco accents, but it's not all stucco. This one, you need to look at this because you're more familiar with
The which ones?
what's what. I get them all confused. This one is, it has a four-push share up front. The parking is kind of on the side and in the rear. Does we have square footage for that?
We don't.
You've already showed that. This is the second viewing of that one.
No.
I don't think it is.
Yeah, it is, because the first one you showed on the inside. Were they parked inside?
No,
No, it's
that was a different one.
That was a different one.
Yeah.
That was the one.
No, it's not,
On
the different-
North.
it's not the different
Similar.
one. It's the same one. Because that one, you go inside and you took a picture of it, and it is number 6.
No, number 6 was farther south,
Was what?
was farther south.
No, it's not. Try number
This
6.
is number 6. No, that's number 5. Number
If you go back
6
to
is
That's 6.
on the south
Chevrolet
side
one.
of town.
Which one's that one then?
This is on the south side of
Hold on.
town.
This is on the south side of town.
Try to ignore that. It's a different building, Brian.
All right,
It's a different-
onward.
All right. I remodeled some of these, that's where I think I know.
The next one
You are on.
that we're on, yeah.
HMD, okay, right there.
46.
What is it,
It was 46.
46,000 square feet? Oh, the bad last one, this one's
Yeah.
40,
This one we do not have.
this one's 46,000 square feet, 3 stories. This one, is right on Main Street. As you can see, there's a lot of this space, which is right along the sidewalk, that doesn't have a very pedestrian-friendly, well, in my opinion. There's not a lot of interface between the sidewalk and people. It's kind of a hazardous safety situation going right onto Main Street and the sidewalk. But they have done some integration here with the patio, lots of 3 stories, lots of different materials and colors. We have a couple slides of this one. Not the right, same one. Okay, this one is. Yeah, oh, it's 115 rooms. I don't know what the square footage is. It's 3 stories. It uses a real variety of materials and colors. And it's off of Main Street, but it's well articulated.
Some 500 a night materials right there.
Unless you're going to the APA conference, and then you get to pay $100.
Ooh.
Yeah. It's
Staycation.
special rate. Yeah, I considered it.
No, they give very good local
This
discounts.
is one of the newer ones. We have it? No, we don't. And it has a ton of, many different materials, colors, facade variation. There is some parking in the front, but not the majority of the parking. There are also some sort of casitas behind that have different, more like that have a different configuration, so they have a variety of unit type.
And gravel parking.
3 stories. It does have gravel parking?
You have gravel
South
south,
end.
Not here, but on the other,
on the back end over there, yeah.
okay. This is an older one, 1 story. And again, the color is consistent with the hillside behind. Pretty simple. Most of the parking is interior to the project.
Is it just that little circle, or is there more in the back? Or is that for the?
There's just sort of.
It's just that.
It's not big. It's very small. This one we have, right? So this. I think this is 100, yeah, it is. This one's 100 rooms. I don't have the total square footage, but it looks like it's 3 stories. This is the Main Street face. They have the porte cochere on the side. some parking in the front. They have a big ugly sign. Sorry, I'm gonna say it. That does not meet our current sign regulations. They have some variety of materials. Whether they're consistent with the surroundings is probably debatable.
You've seen one rock, you've seen them all.
Yeah, this one has some carports, it looks like. Most of the parking is all on the front, 2 stories. Brown, pretty straight. This one is relatively new, interior hallways, 3 stories, some facade variation, a lot of one material type and a very light color. Pet friendly.
That's important.
This, again, that's right along Main Street, so the parking is kind of on the side and the back. 2 stories, interesting, different color for the roof and the rest of it, pretty pinky orangey. Similar, 2 stories. Most of the parking, there is parking along the front here that's required, that is right along Main Street. Basically, one big, long facade.
They have a nice grass area in the back, which
They?
is, yeah, they do.
Good for the dogs.
Yeah, they have a lot of
Big.
parking back there.
I've actually stayed here with my doggies before I moved here.
Worked there.
This looks more townhouse style. It's 3 stories, has some facade variation a little bit, not horizontal except for the dormers, but it's got some articulation. Not a lot of variety in materials. It does have these corners, which are kind of a focal point of something a little bit different. Great. This one is brick. It's set, most of it's set back from Main Street, 2 stories, exterior hallways. This one is 1 story, probably
Forget about that one.
manufactured, interesting colors, light colored roof, light colored siding. Parking is all in front.
Doesn't look like a motel when you pass it.
It is!
I
Is it like 13 rooms?
It's very small.
Less.
I don't think we have that one.
They have new beds.
I always forget that one's
I don't think
Hot tub.
in a hot tub.
It's really small. It's probably 15,000 square feet, I would guess.
Yeah.
If that.
If that.
It's really small.
Big footprint though, you can see.
This is a relatively new one. Lots of different materials, colors, 3 feet in height. Lots of facade variation, both vertical and horizontal. Parking's kind of in the front. This one, the parking's in the front. Sort of a variety of materials. You could debate whether or not they're consistent with the surroundings, but it does have different material types. 2 stories.
We live in Tudor England, don't you know?
Yeah.
I thought so. This is the hotel that everyone loves to hate. It's actually not in the city limits. So this is 3 stories, basically pretty big, long facade. This is a little jug, it's probably 18 inches, this might be another 18 inches. We're proposing to require a 5-foot shift in facade after 30 feet.
What were the ones, maybe a couple ago, the one you said this is another new one? Do you know how much of a facade sort of jut out that was? The one that was like black and orange and light? Yeah.
This is probably more than 5 feet.
Okay.
Probably about 5 feet. And then this one is less than that. And then up and down, it's probably maybe 5 feet. And it has little architectural things. That's it. So, based upon those pictures, what jumps out at you? What about these hotels is offensive? What about these hotels do you like? As we move forward to allow new hotels, what would you like to see more of or less of?
I'm glad we're moving forward
Sorry?
with how they look. I said I'm glad we're moving forward with,
Oh. Me too.
I think we can start with the low-hanging fruit, not this. I think the big, giant, unbroken wall, the color scheme that doesn't vary horizontally at all. You have the vertical variation, but it's just like, here's a giant, Caterpillar hotel going down the highway. And this is, this is not just us. This is like very frequently held up as like the don't make it look like that. How do we do that example? But at the same time, I think it becomes very obvious based on some of the newer hotels you showed where there's facade variation to have facade variation just to meet the requirements or what were perceived to be the requirements when it isn't actually very aesthetically pleasing. Where it's just like, okay, we'll do a jet out here, a jet out here, a jet out here. Whereas I would say the newer one, which is mostly black, which has all the variation in materials, did a good job of having it not just be kind of stair-stepped, where it was actually, this room actually goes out in this way, and that's why there's a jut out on the building.
So sort of form-following function.
Form-following function rather than just like, okay, we need to have a 5-foot variation every however many feet. And I know, obviously regulations-wise, there's only so much we can do, but yeah.
That's so good.
Yeah, it's very obvious the color and form variation required hotels that you have seen on the newer ones, all of the ones, and I don't know why they all pick the same color scheme where it's like black and red and tan and beige. They're all that color. There's like 3 hotels that were built in the last 5 years that all do the same, this section's this color, this section's this color thing, but yeah. I'm actually not super psyched about that.
They're following the fad.
Yeah.
And plus, they have these motels that require that they meet certain things in order to be named, like a Hyatt, for
Yeah,
instance.
totally.
We may not want to encourage that.
Well, we may not, but
Yeah, that's my bigger overall comment are the ones that look like they could be anywhere. I think there are a lot of particularly outdoor recreation focused communities. You look at Springdale, you're in even areas in St. George now, although I don't want us to be St. George. But other communities that have a local character where even the chain hotels coming in have function and form that looks like, oh, this is very clearly the Springdale La Quinta, whereas.
Springdale is an interesting place. And they have a very small permanent population. So they rely entirely on tourists. They have a style that they're trying to emulate, which is the national park style. It's all pretty new construction. And I think, and I've looked at their guidelines, they're not very specific at all.
Yeah, but they still get things
They
that
get
look.
it, they get it for some reason, the businesses, I think there was a lot of involvement with the chamber and businesses, and everybody figured, we gotta make this look good in order
Yeah.
for us to maintain our aesthetic. We don't really have an aesthetic in Moab so much. Park City definitely has an aesthetic. A lot of, many places do, and I think Moab's aesthetic is eclectic.
Yeah. So if it's something that looks like it was just transported from Grand Junction and dropped here, those are the ones that, if there's a way we can.
But if there was one from Springdale that was dropped here, it would make it look.
Yeah, or like honestly, and I wrote like, I really like the kind of old school seedy motel style with the exterior and the neon sign and the outdoor entrances and the balcony on the top, like just because it is, you kind of get that retro vibe, like even the one, it keeps changing names south of town with like the Jeep on the sign where you have that kind of the wrought iron kind of, the Apache is like the classic example of it where it's kind of goofy and it's good because of that. It's not corporate. It's not just the, Looks like it could be anywhere. Like number 8, I think was what I pointed out was one, it was like, this doesn't look like anything special. It looks like someone took this chain hotel and just plopped it here.
Yeah, the older ones stop at 2 stories, I think.
They do.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Will you go to number 7?
If you,
You passed it.
No, keep going. The slide numbers are on the top
Yeah.
of the,
Oh, cool.
yeah, so I think avoiding this, where we have nothing but concrete, where there's no greenery, there's no, it's just blah. A sea of concrete, you know, moving some of the parking to the back, requiring some landscaping, that can also help with the flow in and out of the building, right? That can make it more welcoming and inviting.
that was one thing I noticed with like Gonzo, is just, I mean, trees. Is there like a requirement for a tree plan?
There is,
And there is, okay.
and this does not meet our current regulations.
Yeah, we're trying to avoid that, actually, because we don't want to use water.
Oh, okay.
Well, we still want.
We could still have
common-
xeriscaping,
Yeah, but we just.
True, but
which is
we have to get together on this.
XERI and not
Yeah,
zero.
because last week you said none on the water, and then this week we're going to say, let's plant trees.
All right, so we don't want
Anything
big
at all.
lawns. We don't want big lawns, but we do want landscaped areas, and we want parking. It's required if you have parking to break it up with islands. Every so many spaces, those islands have to have a tree. But you can still do drought tolerant and drip irrigation and all those kinds of things. But those standards would be beefed up too.
Yeah. Another thing in particular that one of the hotels had was, which is why I asked what it was called, was usable space on top of the portico share. I really like that, where it was a patio, it was a balcony on top. The very first one
That
we
was
looked
number
at.
5.
Yeah, the very first one we looked at, where, you know, the roof is pretty level with the highway, the roadway. All I see in that roof is like, look at all this like space you could have for gardens or green roofs or,
That one?
yes, just because it is on the level and what you see is the roof, which isn't terribly,
You see a whole bunch of roof.
yeah, you see a whole bunch of roof, which is okay. I mean, it's fine. It's this color. I like the color of this one, the color scheme. But wouldn't it be great if it was like, you know, if they have a restaurant on site and they're growing their own food, or literally just like some sort of green roof would help with their energy requirements too. I really like that. But like the patio on number 5 on the top of the portico share, it could be anything up there, but I just like the idea of used space when you already have a second story. It's not saying put a third story on top of everything, but rather than just having the blank flat roof, which you often have. I like what they did there, where they made it,
Like a rooftop
yeah,
chill
you can
spot.
sit up there and watch the light parade, you know?
Exactly.
But you know, one of the reasons I think you liked that one motel was because it's set back so far.
It is.
And that's one of the things we should try to recommend is,
Wait, which one?
if you
Number
go
1?
back to that one you had there, was it number 1?
Yeah.
You'll notice how far back set that is. That's not the highway right there. Okay,
Correct.
no, it's not. That's
No,
a-
it's
that's
the
a-
drive.
Frontage.
It's the
Driveway. So-
frontage road,
So
yeah.
you have it where it's down low and that setback, I think, should be something we recommend. The further the setback, the less of the profile you have to see on that motel. When you're driving by and you see a motel that's only 50 feet back and it's 3 stories high and it's 300 feet wide, that's not what we're looking for, right?
That's also
I mean-
unused
Well, this-
space though too, so I feel like there's a happy medium where you're not right on the highway, but you're also not so far back that you have all of this area in front, which is literally just gonna be a frontage road all the time and can't be employee housing and can't be.
But that has to be on that one, but setbacks are important, I think.
Especially in the North Corridor.
Yes.
In the RC zone. In downtown, you don't
You-
want
Yeah,
setbacks.
yeah, you may not have a choice,
But the
but
standards would be different in the C3, which is the downtown
Yeah.
zone.
I think it's, yeah. And that has a
I mean,
lower
this also
profile.
benefits from the fact that the grade is much lower than the roadway. So you look over, it doesn't obstruct the view when you're on the highway.
Yeah.
And the entrance to the community, that's nice too. I like the false porch, the false balconies that I think it was like 2 or 3 have, where if they do have the windows, they have a little, it was one of the Best Westerns. That one. That's nice. It's not a real balcony, but it has some sort of variation where it fits in the character of it's on Main Street and it's the, you're looking over
Right, but
Main
they
Street.
did this to Main Street, but they left 100 North.
Oh, for
is-
sure, but we're talking four-sided architecture now and what
Yeah.
we're gonna require in the future. And yes, it would have been very nice if it looks like that on all the sides. It definitely breaks it up visually. This color I am not a fan of though.
No.
Not particularly.
Well, there's no windows. Do we have any on that one side?
Right, and it's really long, unbroken facade, and that is not good, and that's already written in, that they have to articulate all the sides.
With our color requirements, it's just color on construction, right? It's not color that's maintained. Because a lot of those pinky ones didn't start out that color. And I feel like what it's gonna fade to here, particularly if you're not used to building here, is something that like, I'm trying to repaint my house and I'm thinking about what it's gonna look like in 3 years, as well as like right after I paint it. And I feel like that's not something that goes into the consideration ever. So all those pink hotels probably didn't start that color pink. They probably started a darker orange, red, something like that, and then faded to like, art deco pink.
Are there restrictions on colors? Or
There could be.
There could
This
be.
is all what
Very
we're,
very
yeah.
general?
And it basically says earth tones consistent with, the palette of natural,
Mhm.
rock, and
From
it's
pink to
pretty
yellow.
general.
Yeah.
But it makes the point, but you're right, that's a really good consideration.
I mean, that's clearly not something we can really regulate, but just when they're looking at our requirements to be like, hey,
What's this look like in 3 years?
stuff fades here really fast.
And I think, we should be able to work with the developers to
Cool.
discuss that as a potential issue. Because some of the out-of-town developers, they don't care about the long-term maintenance,
No, not at all.
really. A lot of
So,
them are gonna
so you have
build in-
earth tones consistent with the natural. I actually quite like the brighter colors if they're done in a way that is that kind of eclectic, fun, like, yeah, turquoise is great. I think that fits with the Southwestern style. Like I was in, Central America a few months ago and, I love the bright yellow, the bright colors and the white. Like it looks really nice and it's upbeat and it's happy and it's not just like depressing beige the whole way. So I don't know if there's variation that can be had in those earth tones, but
This one is a lot of different, various colors.
I like this one. Nice.
is there,
What is it about the
The colors are good. I mean, it's not super bland. It sticks out as far as, the different levels with the facade. And
It has a little modern element.
it's modern. That's really what it is. The motels aren't modern. You guys said that you like some of the older motels, but the first thing that I realized is I thought the rails were ugly on some of them, and I was like, that's just a really terrible choice. And there's no way that you could try to incorporate this like retro look perfectly, because, it would just look like they put it in ironically.
oh, for sure. I just meant that like there could be room for like someone to build another, like, maybe.
Well, like
Yeah.
10, they tried to update. They've done some modernization, but it's really hard because they changed their sign, they changed
Yeah.
a few other facade
Yeah,
things,
that's
but
weird.
there's not much they can do about the little, what do you call those?
If these guys wanted to tear this down and rebuild it in the future, Would they have to build it so that the front of it is touching the, like, the pedestrian access? Or can they still build it with parking in the front and the hotel, like, behind the parking,
The majority of the parking would have to be to the side of the rear.
if they rebuilt it? Yeah.
Is there a way, can you go back to the one we were just on? I forget what number, I apologize. Or honestly, any with, yeah. The one thing I don't like about this is the completely straight line windows. I've been trying to kind of pick up what it is about a lot of the like large facade ones where even if they do have that horizontal variation, it still looks really kind of bleak. And I
Flat.
think it's because every window is completely in line, vertically. And I don't know if that's something that's been done in design requirements or design standards where, because, yeah, if they're, it's the same, it's what I like about the hoodoo is the fact that there's the room variation interior, which creates variation on the outside.
Can we see
So
that hoodoo?
every room is not lined up
It's-
exactly.
This is, so, like that, like the hoodoo, way more expensive to
For
do.
sure, absolutely. But if there's some,
Yeah, there's a reason for them.
yeah,
Egress and those conditioned
for sure.
heaters and coolers and all that.
No, but this, yeah, the hoodoo has lots and lots of variation.
For
Mhm.
sure. But I mean, that's why I like the kind of false balconies, is because at least it's not just window, 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 window. There's something. Or even like variation where it's like, okay, this room has a real balcony, and then 2 down, 3 over, this one has a real balcony. And so it's not just kind of, I don't know that we can write that in, but just, we're talking about what's visually appealing, and that's much nicer, I think. Because you can have all the lateral variation in the world, and it's still just a line of windows when you're back from it.
And the air conditioning units are kind of a necessary evil.
For sure. Oh, yeah, I don't, that's
I mean,
fine.
projects like this don't have those, the really expensive ones, but.
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense. I don't mind
Yeah,
those.
I'd like to see more balconies, but that's really dumb because we would be using so much more air conditioning if 100 rooms had balconies. They would just be letting out all of their cold air all the time.
So what are you suggesting?
If they're gonna be energy efficient, they probably shouldn't have balconies all over the place. Maybe like a communal balcony where everybody can hang out together on a big, huge patio.
I really like the idea of usable porte cocheres if the porte cochere is not on the top level of the hotel. If they have one, which I think most do here just for shade reasons in the summer. So like this one, well, okay, this one would be an example of one where you could have, and it might actually,
There's a balcony,
Yeah,
like,
there-
kind of recessed back there, but it's not on top of the porte cochere.
okay.
Unrelated to looks, exactly how feasible is solar for requirement on a building? I know it's like expensive now, but
And we'll talk about that
At a different point.
We'll devote an entire work session,
Okay.
discussion session to that. It depends on who you ask. With solar, Brian's
That's right.
buddy that says that 20-25% on site is reasonable. We're proposing 80.
Oh.
And we are intentionally, I mean, it was a conscious decision to go pretty restrictive because we want innovative solutions, not just the same old thing.
Yeah.
And where the city council is kind of coming down is, their preference would be to only allow a certain number of rooms. That's tricky legally and administratively. So what they want to do is kind of limit their choices by the development standards they put in. So if somebody isn't creative enough to figure it out, then they don't get it done. So, and there's a lot, state of the art is changing really fast. Now there's low subscriber solar, and, there are a lot of places that are going all electric and then using more solar. So it's a changing field. certainly, there are projects that are 100% on-site, through various means, but they're probably really high-end, and have a fair amount of roof associated. So it's tough on the smaller projects.
Okay.
They could put solar over the parking to
They could, absolutely.
generate, to increase the percentage,
Yeah, what if,
You could use
Covered
5
parking,
acres.
and then have covered parking. I mean, you have to provide parking, so.
Yeah,
yeah, you could cover a whole parking lot, huh, with solar. I was thinking like an off-site solar that all of the hotels could buy into, to buy their solar, and it didn't have to be on-site. But if you covered your parking lot with solar, that would probably do it, huh? And if you did a passive building
And then your
design.
cars are cooler.
I like the idea of a bunch of people, a bunch of hotels contributing to the same one offsite.
you like what?
The idea of just, she said, an offsite solar, which is a bunch of hotels that buy into it to,
And if
Fund
that's
it.
an option in the future, that could be how they can meet their requirement if we write it in.
And we have it in there, it says 80% on-site, 20% subscriber solar, or
Oh.
whatever, off-site subscription service, or, but that will play more and more of a role in the marketplace. Rocky Mountain Power is being pretty aggressive about that, and the city is actually working with them to come up with some sites on city property that they could use for solar, so that we can have more subscribers. And this energy efficiency stuff is constantly changing.
Yeah.
And there are hotels that, there's a whole group, a whole website of hotels that are just trying to meet maximum efficiency and energy consumption. And they all try to beat each other out, and it's a big deal in the industry. Lucas, what do you like, what don't you like?
One of the big things that I don't appreciate is like the large parking lots out front, but it's like, and kind of what Brian was talking about in terms of like in the north corridor is not being so close up to the road. Like the new construction that's happening really kind of is taken from like the view of the portal. And that's like, when I first drove into town, that was kind of one of the more like awe-inspiring views that I saw, and now it's kind of blocked off by that building when I drive in, which is unfortunate. I don't, the new construction that's going, yeah, yeah,
It's pretty close to the road.
yeah. And like, as it went up and like those walls went up, like I kind of got a little sadder,
I was surprised
yeah.
It's big.
how close it is, especially after it's widened.
Yeah, and just like hearing that like the parking needs to be kind of like off to the side or in the back, I appreciate. Like coming from the city, I'm sick and tired of seeing of like giant parking lots all over the place. But yeah, I agree on a lot of the other stuff that was discussed.
I mean, one thing we haven't seen in any of these really is any interface with the local community.
Yes.
And if there is some way that we can have more interface, you know, some of them have restaurants, but they're usually off to the side, or they're just serving breakfast.
And it's primarily for their guests.
Right.
I'm
So we're
excited to
talking
talk about the commercial
The commercial.
requirements at our next meeting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's where that comes from.
Well, it'll be interesting to see the hotel that's getting built where Gearheads is, because Gearheads will still be on the first level, right? Eventually.
Your heads has moved temporarily.
I saw that. I was surprised they have a very permanent looking sign for being in a temporary location.
Where did they move to?
They moved down,
Across the street and south.
By the Maverick.
yeah, across from O'Reilly on that corner.
I mean, they had this deal with the hotelier, the hotel builder, that he could stay open and they provided parking, and now the school district won't provide construction staging area and some parking, and so the Gearheads people just said, we'll go out of business if we don't do something about this, because you won't be able to park and get to it. So they were very smart in making that decision.
Cool. Anyone else have any input from the photos? This was really helpful.
Yeah, I like everything that everybody's been saying. I like porosity to the streets so that the pedestrians who are not staying at the hotel maybe have a reason to go into the hotel. And maybe not even just for a commercial reason. Maybe they provide some shade so that people are more inclined to walk around on Main Street. So if a hotel is on Main Street, maybe they have a shade structure. I'd like to see more bike racks. And for the hotels that are on the highway, I'd like to see really big buffers with plants, and then the bike path going by the hotel so that people staying at the hotels feel like using the sidewalk is actually an option for them. And then the other thing is I'd just like to see more preservation of view sheds. So keeping buildings at 1 to 2 stories and maybe making it a little bit more site specific. So we go look at the zoning and decide which sites could maybe handle 3 stories and which should only be 1 or 2 stories.
And the way the language is drafted now, it's 2 stories unless you are doing at least 20,000 square feet of commercial.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can go a 3rd story with your accommodations.
Yeah.
But we may want to just say just 2 stories. That's something we can talk about further.
And with stories, is there a max building height?
3 stories,
Is 30 feet? 40?
40.
40. And it's measured by the average grade of the lot, or?
Well, it's measured by the lot underneath. So if the lot underneath slopes, the maximum building height kind of slopes with it.
Not the street. It's the lot.
I'm sorry?
It's not the street, it's the lot.
It's the lot,
Yeah.
right. So you have to, so if you have the lot and it goes like this, then your envelope parallels it at maximum of 40 feet. In most of these zones. I'm not sure about the C2. Which is 3 stories. Okay, cool. Parting words?
Nope.
Thank you, this is kind of fun. Now, unfortunately, every time you go anywhere, you will notice hotel design.
Which is funny because you hid the names, but honestly, that would have been very educational for me because I can never remember what any of them are called. People are like, oh, we're at the Hampton. I'm like, which one's the Hampton? Which one are you talking about? People ask, where should I stay? I'm like, I don't know, I live here. I don't have to stay here.
Just not with me, and remember, just not with me.
What?
I said, you can say anywhere, just not with me.
Yeah.
Just wait for the next
Yes,
trivia night.
we are
maybe.
adjourned. Thank you, Joey. Thank you for your wonderful photos. That was really helpful.
Thanks, everybody, it's a good meeting.
Yes.
Thank you, Nora.
Look at our whole commission. So exciting.